The silence in this house used to feel comfortable, like a favorite old armchair worn smooth in all the right places. Now it presses in, heavy with unspoken words and the ghosts of laughter that feel like they belong to someone else's life. My life. But a life I barely recognize anymore. It started, I suppose, or maybe it just culminated on my 55th birthday. Not a landmark year, not one demanding fireworks or grand gestures, just mine. Another turn around the sun, a quiet marker in the passage of time. I'd always loved my birthday, even as the numbers climbed higher. It felt like a day that was uniquely mine, a small anchor in the often turbulent waters of single parenthood and making ends meet after Richard left. Chloe, my daughter, my only child, usually made a fuss. Even as a teenager, when eye rolls were her primary form of communication, she'd manage a card, maybe some slightly burnt toast in bed. As she got older, it became brunch or a shared bottle of wine, moments I treasured more than she could possibly know. They were proof, weren't they? Proof that the bond we shared, the one I'd poured my entire being into nurturing, was still strong. This year felt different, though, charged with a nervous energy that had little to do with me and everything to do with her upcoming wedding. Chloe was getting married. My little girl, now a whirlwind of bridal magazines, venue tour, and stressed phone calls, was embarking on her own life with Liam. Liam. He was fine. Perfectly pleasant, adequately handsome, with a smile that seemed permanently affixed and eyes that didn't quite crinkle when he used it. He adored Chloe, that much was clear, perhaps bordering on indulged her, but who was I to judge? She seemed happy, swept up in the romance and the planning, and her happiness had always been my lodestar. The wedding planning had consumed her naturally. Our phone calls shifted from catching up to logistical nightmares and budget anxieties. And the budget, well, that was a significant part of the anxiety, mostly mine. They'd chosen a venue, a stunningly restored manor house with sprawling gardens and predictably a price tag to match. "Mom, it's perfect," Chloe had gushed, her voice breathless with excitement. "It's everything I've ever dreamed of." And I, caught in the reflection of her joy, hadn't had the heart to point out that dreams often come with invoices. I dipped into savings I'd painstakingly accumulated, money earmarked for fixing the leaky roof or perhaps, just perhaps, a small trip for myself someday. A significant chunk went towards the initial booking, and a larger, far more painful amount was promised for the main deposit, the one that secured the date, the caterers, the whole extravagant affair. "You're the best, Mom," she'd said, a quick hug before dashing off to meet Liam for another tasting menu. "We couldn't do this without you." The words warmed me, a familiar balm to the low thrum of financial worry. Of course she couldn't, I was her mother. This is what mothers did, didn't they? Sacrificed, enabled dreams, even dreams that felt slightly out of reach. So my birthday approached, nestled awkwardly between dress fittings and florist consultations. I didn't expect a parade. But I hoped for a call. Maybe brunch squeezed in between appointments. A text, even. Something to acknowledge that amidst the whirlwind of wedding white, her mother still existed, still marked time on the calendar. The day dawned gray and drizzly, the weather mirroring the vague unease coiling in my stomach. I made myself coffee, trying to shake off the feeling. "She's busy," I told myself. "It's a crazy time, she'll call later." I tidied the house, rearranged cushions that didn't need rearranging, checked my phone more often than necessary. Silence. Mid-morning, my sister Carol called. Happy birthday wishes, questions about Chloe's wedding, the usual chatter. "Have you heard from the bride-to-be?" she asked, a knowing edge to her voice. Carol had always found Chloe a little self-involved. "Not yet," I said, forcing cheerfulness. "She's swamped, wedding stuff," was all Carol said, but the syllable hung in the air, heavy with unspoken commentary. Lunchtime came and went. The silence from my phone felt louder now, accusatory. I ate a sandwich standing up in the kitchen, staring out at the rain-streaked garden. Maybe I should call her? No, it was my birthday, she should call me. It felt petty, childish even, keeping score like this, but the hurt was beginning to curdle into something sharper. By late afternoon, the unease had solidified into a cold dread. This wasn't just busy. This felt deliberate. Had I offended her somehow, said the wrong thing about the bridesmaids' dresses, questioned the astronomical cost of the artisanal cheese platter? My mind raced, sifting through recent conversations, searching for a misstep. Nothing. Just the usual flurry of wedding talk, my contributions met with distracted nods or enthusiastic agreement, depending on whether they involved money. The drizzle turned into a steady downpour. I put on some music, attempting to create a semblance of celebration for one. Ella Fitzgerald. Her voice usually soothed me, but today it felt melancholic, each note a reminder of my solitude. The clock ticked past 6, then 7. Dinner time. I wasn't hungry. The phone remained stubbornly silent, dark screen reflecting my own crestfallen face. Then finally, around 8:30, it buzzed. My heart leaped, a ridiculous, hopeful flutter. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. I took a breath, smoothed my expression, and answered, aiming for casual warmth. "Hi, honey. Mom, hi." Her voice was bright, rushed. "Listen, quick question. Did you happen to see that email from the caterer about the vegan options?" Liam's cousin is strictly vegan, apparently, and I can't find the attachment anywhere. She barreled on, listing dietary restrictions, table plan dilemmas, a broken zipper on a potential dress. Not a word about the date, not a hint of recognition. My throat tight. I listened, making appropriate murmuring sounds, my mind reeling. How could she just not know? Okay, Mom, gotta run, she chirped, the end of her monologue arriving abruptly. Liam's here. We're trying to finalize the guest list. It's a nightmare, love you. Chloe, wait, I managed, my voice thin. Yes, impatience colored the single syllable. I hesitated. Should I say it? Should I prompt her? Why should I have to? It's my birthday today, sweetheart. Silence, not a shocked silence, not an oh my god, how could I silence? Just a pause, then a light, airy laugh that scraped against my raw nerves. Oh, Mom, oh my god, it totally slipped my mind. Happy birthday. It was tossed off, an afterthought, like remembering to pick up milk. With all this wedding craziness, my brain is just fried, you know how it is. I didn't know how it was. I knew planning her wedding felt all-consuming to her, but I couldn't comprehend forgetting your own mother's birthday. It wasn't just slipped my mind. It felt erased, invalidated. Right, I said, the word flat, devoid of emotion. Well, thanks. We'll celebrate properly soon, okay? She rushed on, already mentally moving to the next item on her checklist. Maybe next week, I'll check my calendar. Okay, gotta go, love you, bye. The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing like an angry insect. Totally slipped my mind. Fried brain, craziness, excuses, thin, flimsy excuses that did nothing to cover the gaping hole she'd just torn open. The rain lashed against the windows, mimicking the storm gathering inside me. It wasn't just the forgotten birthday. It was the casualness of the forgetting, the utter lack of genuine remorse. It was the culmination of 1,000 tiny cuts, a growing awareness that my sacrifices, my support, my very existence were being taken for granted, reduced to a footnote in the grand production of her wedding. And somewhere in that storm, a cold, hard realization began to form. The manor house, the sprawling gardens, the deposit, the very large deposit I had promised. The one due in 3 weeks. If my birthday could slip her mind so completely, maybe something else could slip mine. The days following my non-birthday were a blur of forced smiles and hollow pleasantries. Chloe called occasionally, always breathless, always needing something, an opinion on font choices for the invitations, confirmation of a payment I'd made for the florist, a sympathetic ear for her latest spat with a bridesmaid. Never once did she mention my birthday again or the promised proper celebration. It was as if the conversation, her careless dismissal, had never happened. But it had happened. It lived inside me now, a cold ember glowing in the pit of my stomach. I started replaying scenes from the past few years, viewing them through this new, painful lens. The time she'd canceled our plans last minute because something better came up with Liam or her friends. The way conversations always seemed to circle back to her needs, her dramas, her triumphs. The casual expectation that my time, my resources, my emotional energy were endlessly available to her. Was Carol right? Had I raised a daughter who saw me not as a person but as a function? A provider, a fixer, an automatic teller machine dispensing funds and unconditional support? The thought was devastating, a betrayal far deeper than a forgotten birthday. It questioned the very foundation of my life, the decades spent pouring myself into her. Richard, my ex-husband, called midway through the week. He rarely called unless it concerned Chloe. Alina, he began, his voice bluff and hearty the way it always was when he wanted something. Just checking in. Chloe mentioned you seemed a bit quiet the other day. Quiet, that was the word she'd used. Not hurt, not upset, quiet, as if my feelings were an inconvenient silence she'd noticed in passing. I'm fine, Richard, I said, keeping my tone level. Just busy. Good, good, he boomed, relief evident in his voice. He hated dealing with messy emotions, always had. Because this wedding is a big deal for her. Huge expense, too. Lucky she has you to help out with that hefty deposit for the venue, eh? Wouldn't want anything to go wrong there. The casualness of his remark, the assumption, the implicit pressure, it was like pouring gasoline on that ember inside me. Lucky she has me. Yes, wasn't she? Lucky to have a mother who would drain her savings, postpone her own needs, and apparently be forgettable enough that her own birthday barely registered. Yes, Richard, I said, my voice dangerously smooth. She's very lucky. He didn't catch the undertone, of course. He just launched into a story about his latest golf game, oblivious. I tuned him out, the ember flaring hotter, the deposit. It loomed large now, not just as a financial obligation, but as a symbol. A symbol of my assumed role, my expected contribution, my utility. Paying it felt like endorsing the dynamic, validating Chloe's casual disregard. It felt like saying, yes, darling, forget my birthday, take my money, take my quiet sacrifices. It's all perfectly fine. But it wasn't fine. It was profoundly, fundamentally not fine. A lifetime of swallowing small hurts, of prioritizing her happiness above my own sense of worth had led to this moment. Where my own daughter, the center of my universe for so long, could dismiss my birthday with a laugh and immediately pivot to her catering crisis. The hurt wasn't fading, it was solidifying, hardening into resolve. I thought about the word forgot. She forgot my birthday. It implied a passive lapse, an accident of a busy mind. But the more I considered it, the more it felt active, a choice, a reflection of priorities. My birthday simply hadn't been important enough to remember amidst the grandeur of her wedding preparations. And so a reciprocal thought began to take shape. What if I forgot something? Something important to her? Something she was taking entirely for granted? The deposit. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. Revenge felt too hot, too angry. This feeling was colder, clearer. It was about consequences. It was about mirroring her own actions, holding up a reflection to show her the impact of being treated as an afterthought. It was about reclaiming a piece of myself I'd allowed to be eroded over years of selfless devotion. Could I actually do it? The thought was terrifying, exhilarating. It went against every maternal instinct I possessed. But wasn't it also an instinct to protect oneself? To demand a measure of respect? The woman who had always put Chloe first, who had smoothed over every bump in her path, was slowly, quietly contemplating a detour. A significant landscape-altering detour. The silence in the house began to feel different again. Not empty, but charged, waiting. The wedding machine ground relentlessly onward, gathering momentum as the date approached. Chloe's calls became more frequent, fraught with the manufactured urgency of seating charts and favor choices. She seemed to exist in a self-contained bubble of tool and tension, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring within me. I played my part, the supportive mother, offering opinions when asked, listening patiently to vendor complaints, nodding along to budget adjustments that always seemed to trend upwards. Externally, I was the picture of maternal devotion. Internally, I was navigating a treacherous landscape of conflicting emotions. Guilt warred with resentment. Love wrestled with profound disappointment. Each conversation felt like a tightrope walk over a chasm. "Mom, the lighting vendor needs a decision by Friday," she'd say, checking an item off her mental list. "Go with the fairy lights," I'd reply calmly. "They'll look magical in the manor gardens." And then the casual bombshell. "Oh, and don't forget that big venue deposit is due next week. Tuesday, I think. Can you just handle it? Send me the confirmation when it's done." Just handle it, like handling the dry cleaning or picking up groceries. A task delegated, assumed complete. No acknowledgement of the sum involved, no flicker of gratitude, just an expectation. My savings account, already significantly lighter, loomed in my mind's eye. The number represented years of careful budgeting, skipped holidays, patched up appliances. It represented security, my security, and I was expected to just hand it over. "I'll look into it," I'd murmur, keeping my voice neutral. Her assumption was so complete she didn't even register the noncommittal nature of my reply. "Great, thanks Mom, you're a lifesaver." Click, gone again, back into her wedding vortex. Each of these exchanges chipped away at my resolve to be the good mother, reinforcing the decision hardening in my heart. It wasn't just the forgotten birthday anymore. It was this relentless, unthinking entitlement. It was the way she compartmentalized me into the role of financial backstop and problem solver, conveniently forgetting the person with feelings and limits part. Liam remained peripheral, a smiling echo of Chloe's desires. If he was aware of the financial strain on me or the emotional undercurrents, he gave no indication. He benefited from my contribution, basking in the reflected glory of the lavish wedding plans, but seemed content to let Chloe manage the mom-asking part of the operation. Was he complicit, or just blissfully ignorant? It hardly mattered. His passive acceptance felt like endorsement. I found myself observing them, Chloe and Liam, during a rare family dinner arranged ostensibly to discuss logistics but quickly devolving into Chloe recounting florist dramas. They were a unit, wrapped up in their shared future, their shared plans. I felt like an outsider looking in, a necessary but peripheral character in their story. They talked about our wedding, our day, but the week clearly didn't extend to the person funding a significant portion of it. That night I pulled out an old photo album, the one filled with pictures of Chloe as a child. Gap-toothed smiles, scraped knees, crayon drawings proudly presented. My heart ached with a fierce, familiar love. Where had that little girl gone? How had she become this demanding, seemingly oblivious stranger? Was it my fault? Had I loved her too much, smoothed the path too thoroughly, protected her from the consequences of her actions for too long? The questions offered no easy answers, only a deepening sadness. But the sadness didn't change my mind. If anything, it strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about me. It was perhaps the hardest parenting lesson I'd ever have to deliver. A lesson about respect, gratitude, and the fact that love, even a mother's love, should not be treated as an infinite, unconditional resource to be drawn upon without thought or acknowledgement. The deposit due date, marked in stark red on my kitchen calendar, crept closer. Tuesday, just a few days away. Each tick of the clock felt amplified, each ring of the phone sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Would I go through with it? Could I truly stand by and let that deadline pass? The quiet strength I was trying to cultivate felt fragile, easily shattered by a single pleading phone call. But the memory of her careless laughter, the breezy dismissal of my birthday, remained stubbornly present. "Oh, Mom, it totally slipped my mind." The words echoed, a painful refrain. And I knew, with a certainty that frightened and empowered me in equal measure, what I had to do. The final weekend before the deposit deadline passed in a strange state of suspended animation. Chloe, blissfully unaware, texted photos of potential hairstyles and agonized over menu card fonts. Liam sent a generic group email reminding the wedding party about rehearsal dinner timings. Life for them continued its inexorable march towards the big day. For me, life felt paused, holding its breath. I moved through the motions, grocery shopping, paying bills, other bills, the routine ones, weeding the neglected corners of the garden. Each mundane task felt freighted with significance, the calm before a self-inflicted storm. My sister Carol called again. "So is the blushing bride remembering you exist this week?" she asked, her tone dry. I debated telling her my plan, wanting an ally, someone to validate the tight knot of anger and hurt inside me. But I hesitated. Explaining it felt wrong. It wasn't something to be debated or discussed. It was a decision born of deep personal pain, a response forged in the silence of being overlooked. "She's focused on the wedding," I said evasively. "As expected." Carol hummed again, that loaded syllable. "Well, don't let her walk all over you, Alina. You've done more than enough." Her words, though vague, felt like a small, steadying hand on my back. More than enough. Yes, I had done more than enough. Monday arrived, gray and indistinct. I spent the day cleaning the house with meticulous care, scrubbing floors and polishing surfaces until they gleamed. It felt symbolic, clearing away the old grime, preparing for something. A fresh start? A reckoning? I wasn't sure. Every time the phone rang, my heart hammered against my ribs. But it was never Chloe asking about the deposit. It was junk calls, a wrong number, my neighbor asking to borrow the lawnmower. It seemed the assumption that Mom would handle it was so absolute, it didn't even require a follow-up. The casual confidence stung, reaffirming my course. That evening I sat with a cup of tea, the photo album open again on my lap. A picture of Chloe, maybe 7 or 8, beaming proudly as she held up a lopsided clay pot she'd made for me. Mother's Day. I remembered her intense concentration, the smudge of clay on her nose, the way she'd whispered, "It's for your treasures, Mommy." My treasures. My throat closed tight. Had I become just a functional object to her now, like that old pot, useful for holding things, her dreams, her financial burdens, but no longer cherished for myself? A wave of profound sadness washed over me, so intense it almost buckled my resolve. Could I really do this to her? Sabotage the wedding she'd pinned all her hopes on? But then the counterargument surged back, fierce and protective of the woman in the picture, the younger me who had sacrificed so much. Wasn't I a treasure too? Didn't I deserve to be remembered, considered, valued? The conflict raged internally, a silent, exhausting battle. Sleep offered little respite, filled with anxious dreams of missed deadlines and ringing phones. I woke on Tuesday morning feeling drained but resolute. The deposit was due today. By 5 p.m., according to the venue contract I still had filed away. I made coffee, my movements deliberate, almost robotic. I checked my online banking. The money sat there, a substantial sum, patiently waiting for instructions I had no intention of giving. The phone stayed silent through the morning. Midday, I went for a long walk in the park, needing air, needing space. The sun had finally broken through the clouds, dappling the path through the leaves. Children laughed on the swings, oblivious. Dog walkers nodded pleasant greetings. An ordinary Tuesday, except it was, not for me, and soon not for Chloe. I sat on a bench, watching the ducks glide across the pond. 5 p.m. the deadline. I pictured the venue manager checking her accounts, frowning, making a note. I pictured Chloe, probably deep in consultations about cake flavors or floral centerpieces, completely unaware. There was no satisfaction in the thought, only a heavy certainty. This was the consequence. This was the echo of her own forgetfulness. I didn't call the venue. I didn't transfer the funds. I didn't send a confirmation email. I let the deadline arrive and I let it pass. I just forgot, just like she had forgotten me. The weight of the decision settled in my bones, a strange mix of dread and liberation. The storm hadn't broken yet, but the barometer had plummeted. All I could do now was wait. The waiting was the strangest part. Hours crawled by on Tuesday evening. Every car that passed on the street seemed to slow down, every distant siren felt like an omen. I made dinner, simple pasta, but barely touched it. The house was too quiet again, the silence stretching taut. I expected the phone to ring any second, unleashing the fury I knew was coming. But it didn't. Wednesday morning dawned, bright and unnervingly normal. Still nothing. Had the venue not noticed? Had they given a grace period? Or was Chloe so wrapped up in her wedding bubble that she hadn't even checked? The uncertainty gnawed at me. Maybe I should call the venue myself anonymously just to confirm. No, that would defeat the purpose. This wasn't about secret sabotage, it was about her realizing the consequence of her own assumptions. She had to be the one to discover it. The call finally came mid-afternoon on Wednesday, not from Chloe, but from a number I didn't recognize. My hand trembled as I answered. May I speak to Alina Vance, please? The voice was female, professional, polite. Speaking, I managed, my throat dry. Ms. Vance, this is Amanda Harrison from Ashworth Manor. I'm calling regarding the booking for Chloe Stanton and Liam Brooks' wedding. Here it comes. Yes. I'm afraid we haven't received the main deposit payment that was due by 5 p.m. yesterday. Our accounts team has double-checked. Is there an issue? Her tone was concerned, not accusatory. Just professional diligence. Oh, I said, injecting a note of mild surprise into my voice. Was that due yesterday? Goodness, time flies. Yes, Tuesday the 15th, she confirmed. As per the contract, failure to pay the deposit means the provisional booking is released. We actually have another couple very interested in that date. Released. The word hung in the air. Right, I said slowly. Well, thank you for letting me know, Amanda. I'll have to speak to my daughter. Please do urge her to contact us immediately if there's been a misunderstanding, Amanda said, still polite. But I must stress the date is no longer secured. We operate on a first-come, first-served basis once a deadline is missed. I understand, thank you. I hung up, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The date was released. It was done. Now it was only a matter of time before Chloe found out. It happened less than an hour later. My phone erupted with Chloe's specific ringtone, the one that used to make me smile, now signaling an incoming storm. I let it ring twice, took a deep, steadying breath, and answered. Mom, her voice was tight, high-pitched with disbelief and rising panic. Mom, Ashworth Manor just called me. They said the deposit wasn't paid. They said the date is gone. What happened? Did you forget to send it? Please tell me you just forgot. There it was again. Forgot. Words she'd used so carelessly about my birthday now wielded in desperation. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Forgot, I echoed, keeping my voice deliberately calm, mirroring the slight, airy tone she'd used with me. Oh goodness, was that yesterday? Yesterday, yes, yesterday, Mom, how could you forget? This is the venue, our whole wedding. Her voice cracked on the last words. I said, feigning contemplation. You know, Chloe, with all this wedding craziness, my brain has just been fried. It must have totally slipped my mind. I used her exact words. The silence on the other end of the line was stark, absolute. It stretched for several seconds, thick with dawning horror and outrage. Then the explosion. Slipped your mind, slipped your mind. Are you kidding me? My wedding venue, you forgot to pay the deposit for my wedding venue. How could you be so careless, so stupid? The insults rained down, fueled by panic and fury. I listened, strangely detached. The words hurt, of course, but they felt distant, like watching a storm rage from behind thick glass. It's funny, isn't it? I said quietly, cutting through her tirade. How easily things can slip your mind when you're preoccupied. Important things. Another pause, shorter this time, pregnant with a different kind of understanding. A cold, dawning suspicion. What are you saying? Chloe's voice was quieter now, laced with disbelief. My birthday, Chloe, I said softly, but the words carried immense weight. My birthday slipped your mind completely just 3 weeks ago. You dismissed it with a laugh. It seems forgetting runs in the family. The accusation hung there, undeniable. The connection made. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Chloe's ragged breathing. Then Liam's voice came on the line, sharp and angry. Alina, what the hell is going on? Chloe's hysterical. You deliberately didn't pay that deposit. Deliberately, he grasped it immediately. I simply applied the same level of importance to the deposit that Chloe applied to my birthday, I stated, my voice level, devoid of anger but firm. It slipped my mind. Liam sputtered, speechless for a moment. This is insane. This is her wedding. You're ruining everything over a forgotten birthday. Was it forgotten, Liam? I asked quietly. Or was it just considered unimportant? More sputtering than threats veiled as concern. Financial ruin, Chloe's devastation, the disappointment of hundreds of guests. I listened calmly. The storm had broken and I was still standing. The confrontation wasn't over. It had merely shifted location. Less than an hour after the explosive phone call, Liam's sleek silver car screeched to a halt in my driveway. Chloe stumbled out, face blotchy and tear-streaked, eyes blazing with fury. Liam followed, his usual charming facade replaced with a mask of tight-lipped anger. They practically stormed the front door, hammering on it before I even had a chance to fully open it. Mom, how could you? Chloe shrieked, pushing past me into the hallway. Liam followed, his presence filling the small space, radiating disapproval. Alina, this has gone too far, he said, his voice low and menacing. This isn't just about Chloe's feelings anymore. This is thousands of dollars down the drain for the initial booking, vendors who might not be available on another date. You need to fix this. Now, fix this. As if I'd spilled juice on the carpet, not made a conscious decision based on years of accumulated hurt. I closed the door quietly behind them, turning to face the storm head-on. My living room, usually a sanctuary, felt like a courtroom. Chloe was packing, twisting her hands, alternating between tearful accusations and angry demands. Liam stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, playing the role of the stern, rational authority figure. There's nothing to fix, Liam. I said calmly, moving towards my favorite armchair but choosing to remain standing. I would not be physically diminished in this conversation. The deadline passed. The venue has released the date. According to Amanda Harrison, there's already another couple interested. You can call them, Chloe cried. Apologize, explain, pay them extra, just get the date back. Why would I do that, Chloe? I asked, my voice quiet but unwavering. She stopped packing, staring at me as if I'd sprouted horns. Why? Because it's my wedding, the most important day of my life. The day I've dreamed about forever, the day you were supposed to be helping me with. And I have helped, I countered. I helped with the initial booking fee. I've listened to endless discussions about color palettes and canapes. I offered my time, my opinions, my emotional support, and I offered a very significant financial contribution towards the deposit. Offered, you promised, Liam interjected sharply. You promised that money, Alina. We budgeted based on that promise. And I expected a certain level of consideration from my daughter in return, I replied, meeting his glare. I expected not to have my birthday completely erased from her consciousness 3 weeks before her wedding. I expected not to be treated like a walking, talking bank machine whose only function is to facilitate her dreams without any thought for her own feelings or existence. Chloe flinched, tears welling up again, but this time they looked less like panic and more like guilt. Or perhaps just wounded pride. It was one day, Mom, she pleaded, her voice trembling. One day I was stressed, I was overwhelmed, I said I was sorry. You said it slipped your mind, I corrected gently. You laughed, Chloe, you laughed it off and immediately started talking about vegan catering options. There was no real apology, just an excuse and a swift change of subject. Do you have any idea how that felt? I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, understanding perhaps. But it was quickly extinguished by renewed anger, likely fanned by Liam's rigid stance beside her. So this is punishment? Liam sneered. You're punishing Chloe, punishing me, punishing our families because your feelings got hurt over a forgotten birthday card? It's not punishment, I said firmly, tired of their deliberate mischaracterization. It's a consequence, it's cause and effect. Actions or inactions have results. My birthday felt unimportant, forgot. So the deposit, which felt like it was being taken entirely for granted, became unimportant, forgot. I used the word again, deliberately letting it hang in the air. This is unbelievable, Liam muttered, shaking his head. You'd sabotage your own daughter's happiness. Is her happiness entirely dependent on a specific expensive venue and a party funded by money given without appreciation? I asked. Is that the foundation of the life you're building together? Perhaps this is an opportunity to reassess priorities. To have a wedding that reflects genuine commitment, not just financial capacity, particularly when that capacity isn't entirely your own. Chloe let out a sob. You hate Liam, don't you? You never liked him, you're doing this to break us up. It was a desperate, manipulative deflection and we both knew it. This has nothing to do with Liam, I said, keeping my gaze steady on hers. This is about you, Chloe, and me. It's about years of feeling overlooked, taken for granted. The birthday wasn't the cause, it was the catalyst. It was the moment I realized that the balance was entirely off, that I had allowed myself to become invisible in my efforts to make your life brighter. I stepped closer, lowering my voice slightly. I love you more than words can say, Chloe. That will never change, but love doesn't mean erasing myself. It doesn't mean accepting disrespect, however unintentional you claim it was. Respect is reciprocal, consideration is reciprocal, remembering is reciprocal. They stood there, stunned into silence. My quiet words seemed to have more impact than their shouting. The power dynamic in the room had shifted. I wasn't the tearful, apologetic mother trying to smooth things over. I was a woman standing her ground, calm, resolute, and finally valuing herself. Now, I said, my voice regaining its normal volume. I think you should both leave. You have a wedding to replan. Perhaps somewhere more within your own budget. Liam looked ready to argue further, but Chloe just stared at me, her expression a mixture of shock, hurt, and something unreadable. She turned abruptly and walked out the door. Liam hesitated, shot me a look filled with venom, and followed her. The silver car sped away, leaving silence in its wake. A different kind of silence this time, not empty, not waiting, just quiet. The quiet of a decision made, a stand taken. It was terrifying, yes. Heartbreaking, absolutely. But underneath it all, a fragile seedling of self-respect was beginning to push its way towards the light. The fallout, as expected, rippled outwards. News travels fast in families, especially news involving drama and money. My phone started buzzing again, but this time it was Chloe or Liam. It was my sister, Carol. Alina, Richard just called me, absolutely spitting feathers. Said you torpedoed Chloe's wedding. What on earth happened? I explained, calmly and concisely, sticking to the facts. The forgotten birthday, the casual dismissal, the subsequent forgetting of the deposit. Carol was silent for a moment, processing. Then she let out a low whistle. Wow, Ellie, just wow. I mean, I always said she took you for granted, but pulling the plug on the venue, that took guts. There was grudging admiration in her voice. It wasn't easy, Carol, I admitted, the emotional toll settling heavily now that the immediate confrontation was over. I feel awful, but also right. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, she said firmly. She needed a wake-up call. A big one apparently. Richard's furious, of course, probably because he knows they might come asking him for money now. The thought hadn't even occurred to me, but Carol was likely right. Richard had always been adept at managing expectations downwards when it came to financial contributions. He offered a token amount towards the wedding, making a great show of generosity, but nothing close to what I had committed. Next came the call from Richard himself. Predictably, he didn't ask for my side of the story. He launched straight into accusations, his voice booming with indignation. Eleanor, what in God's name were you thinking? Humiliating Chloe like that, sabotaging her wedding, have you lost your mind? Richard, I interrupted, my voice colder than I intended. Did Chloe tell you why I might have done such a thing? She said you had some ridiculous grievance about your birthday, he scoffed. A birthday. You're jeopardizing her entire future over a forgotten birthday? Grow up, Eleanor. It wasn't just the birthday, Richard, it was the attitude, it was the entitlement. It was the realization that I was being viewed as an obligation and a bank, not a mother or even a person. And frankly, my finances and my feelings are none of your business anymore. Chloe is my daughter too, he roared. And you've caused her immense pain and embarrassment. She caused me immense pain first, Richard, I replied quietly. Pain you've consistently ignored or minimized for years. Perhaps she's finally learning that actions have consequences, a lesson you never seemed inclined to teach her. I heard him sputtering on the other end, clearly unprepared for my directness. You're being vindictive and cruel, he finally managed. Think what you like, Richard. And I hung up. Hanging up on Richard felt surprisingly liberating. Other calls trickled in. An aunt who thought I'd gone too far, surely there was another way, dear. A cousin who offered veiled support, Chloe always was a bit spoiled, was she? Publicly, the consensus seemed to be shock and disapproval, largely orchestrated, I suspected, by Chloe and Richard painting me as the villain. But privately there were murmurs, acknowledgments of Chloe's long-standing self-absorption. I felt isolated, the target of family gossip, yet strangely serene. The decision felt less like an act of aggression and more like an act of self-preservation. I hadn't set out to ruin her wedding, I had set out to reclaim my own value. If her wedding became collateral damage in that process, perhaps the foundations it was built upon weren't as solid as she believed. One afternoon, my neighbor Martha stopped by as I was attempting to prune the roses, something I hadn't had much time for recently. She's a kind, no-nonsense woman in her 70s, widowed for years. Heard there was a bit of drama, she said, leaning on the fence, her eyes shrewd but kind. I hesitated, unsure how much she knew or what her opinion might be. Family stuff, I said vaguely. Ah, she nodded knowingly. The hardest kind. Saw the young couple leaving in a hurry the other day, looked like thunder. I gave a weak smile. Something like that. You know, Eleanor, she said, lowering her voice slightly. Sometimes you have to prune things right back hard so they can grow back stronger. Applies to roses, applies to families. She patted my arm over the fence. You look tired, but you also look lighter. Her simple observation, her quiet solidarity meant more than all the familial pronouncements put together. Lighter. Yes, maybe I did feel lighter. The burden of expectation, the weight of constantly seeking approval that never truly came, had been lifted. In its place was sadness, yes, and uncertainty about the future of my relationship with Chloe. But there was also space. Space for me, space to breathe. The house felt quiet again, but not oppressive. It felt like my own space, reclaimed. The bitterness was still there, a lingering aftertaste, but it was mingling with something new, something that felt suspiciously like peace. The immediate aftermath was messy. Chloe and Liam scrambled, frantically trying to salvage their plans. Ashworth Manor, true to their word, had indeed booked the date to another couple within days. I heard through Carol that there were tearful phone calls, desperate searches for alternative venues on short notice, and a significant scaling back of their original vision. The dream wedding, funded significantly by my forgotten deposit, was no more. They eventually found a place, a hotel function room, available on a less desirable Friday 3 months later than planned. It was adequate, functional, a far cry from the fairytale manor house. The guest list was slashed, the artisanal cheese platter became a distant memory, and the elaborate floral arrangements were replaced with something far more modest. Liam's parents, I gathered, stepped in with some financial help, but not enough to replicate the original grandeur. Richard, despite his blustering, contributed little more than unsolicited advice. The financial burden and the logistical nightmare fell squarely on Chloe and Liam. For the first time in her life, perhaps, Chloe was facing the direct, unbuffered consequences of her own assumptions and actions, and by extension mine. Did I feel guilty watching this unfold from a distance? Yes, a part of me, the mother part, felt a pang of sympathy for her stress, her disappointment. But the stronger part, the part that had finally stood up for Eleanor Vance, felt a sense of quiet justification. This wasn't cruelty, it was reality. It was the world responding to the energy they had put out, the energy of expectation without appreciation. Chloe didn't call me. Weeks turned into a month, then two. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I sent a brief text on her original wedding date, simply saying, "Thinking of you." She didn't reply. I knew the relationship was broken, perhaps irrevocably. The easy intimacy we once shared, the assumption of unconditional support, that was gone. Rebuilding it, if possible at all, would require effort from both sides, acknowledgement and apology from her that might never come. And strangely, I found I was okay with that. The desperate need for her approval, the willingness to sacrifice my own needs on the altar of her happiness, had evaporated. I loved my daughter deeply, immutably. But I no longer needed her validation to feel whole. I started using the money I hadn't spent on the deposit, for myself. I finally got the roof fixed, patching the leak that had been a low-level worry for years. I booked a consultation to get new eyeglasses, replacing the scratched pair I'd been meaning to update forever. And then, I did something truly radical. I looked at brochures for a small group tour to Italy, a trip I'd dreamed of for decades but had always dismissed as too expensive, too indulgent, something to be saved for someday. Someday, I realized, didn't have to be a distant horizon. It could be now. I paid the deposit for the trip, my deposit for my dream. It felt symbolic, a tangible reclaiming of my own future. One crisp autumn afternoon, months after the non-wedding and the subsequent rescheduled downsized event, to which I was pointedly not invited, an exclusion that stung but didn't break me, I was packing for Italy. Sorting through clothes, making lists, my phone rang. It was Chloe. My breath hitched. I hesitated, then answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Hello, Chloe." "Hi, Mom." Her voice was small, hesitant, not angry, not demanding, just subdued. "Hi, I got your postcard," she said. I'd sent one from Rome a few days earlier, a picture of the Colosseum with a simple message. "Thinking of you, hope you are well." No demands, no recriminations, just a tentative bridge across the silence. "Oh, good," I said. "Italy is amazing." "Yeah," she said quietly. "It looks nice." An awkward pause stretched between us. "Liam and I were okay," she offered tentatively. "The wedding was smaller but nice, quiet." "I'm glad it was nice," I said sincerely. Another silence, then the words I wasn't sure I'd ever hear. "Mom, I'm sorry." It was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry about your birthday and everything. I was awful." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and unexpected, not tears of sadness but of release. "Thank you for saying that, Chloe," I whispered back, my voice thick. "It means a lot." It wasn't a magic fix. It didn't instantly erase the hurt or mend the deep fractures, but it was a start. A crack of light in the wall that had stood between us. We talked for a few more minutes, awkwardly, carefully. About Italy, about her new job, about small, everyday things. Not about the deposit, not about the venue, not about the fight. It wasn't time for that yet. Maybe it never would be. But as I hung up the phone, the quiet in my house felt different yet again. It felt peaceful, earned. The reflection staring back at me from the window wasn't the overlooked, undervalued woman I had been. She was still quiet, yes, but her strength wasn't hidden anymore. It radiated outwards. I had forgotten a deposit, yes, but in doing so, I had finally remembered myself, and that felt like the most important thing of all.